Point Reyes Wetlands has the highest E. coli levels in California.
Yes, here is another, some more controversy in Point Reyes. Everyone sort of knows at this point that the cattle ranchers are sort of causing some big problems in this beautiful national park. And, we've talked about it a lot. They're starting to kill Tule elk because the Tule elk were competing with the cattle for food, for grass in the area. So they're saying, okay, you can only keep a certain amount of Tule elk in the area, and that means they're killing them and keeping the herd to a certain amount, which is sad. Now, it's been determined that the highest reported E. coli levels in a wild form of water in California comes from the streams and the wetlands of Point Reyes. All of these drain out into the ocean, basically, where there's Kehoe Beach, there's Drake's Beach, there's Abbotts Lagoon, and Tomales Bay. Tomales Bay obviously being big for its oysters and, right? Don't they do other food there?
There's tons of seafood coming out of
seafood coming out of Tomales Bay, which is kind of gross now that you think
oysters are probably the most notable, but there's a lot of seafood, yeah.
So, and basically, the reason why there's huge E. coli levels is because there's something like 10,000 pounds of, 130 million pounds of poop and urine annually coming from these cows, thousands of cows. So this is just another problem that Point Reyes is having with these cattle ranchers, and there is a determined group of conservationists and environmentalists who are out there trying to bring this information to the forefront because they want those cattle ranchers out of there, even though they just signed a new lease of 5 to 20 years in Point Reyes.
I have some differentiating opinions on this in several different ways.
Let's hear it.
First of all, some of my favorite cheese in the entire world is made in that area of the world. Some of my favorite cheeses and all of, Cowgirl Creamery is my favorite kind of cheesery in the world, I'd say. And they have a lot of their dairy products coming from that area. Northern California specifically, they are Northern California cheese. So I very much respect where they come from, and I know that company has an opinion about environmentally friendly and all of that. Most dairies do, especially the smaller ones that aren't like corporate run.
And these farms have been there since the 1860s.
It's in what was the president that signed that into JFK that said, leaving the cattle ranchers in the terms, like they are in that bill that gives them,
that makes it a national park,
but it gives them the right to stay there.
Exactly. Yep.
So not only do I love Northern California cheese, I also love Northern California outdoors. So I don't want to see contamination, pollution. I told you something a couple days ago, and so I have a very unique perspective on this, in that in the last 48 hours, I have fallen completely for a YouTube page involving a guy who's like a 22-year-old dairy farmer from Pennsylvania. I have watched at least 6 hours of his content in the last 48 hours, and all it is a day in the life of this 22-year-old 10th generation dairy farmer just doing his job. But the majority of his job is moving poop. All of these, that's the majority of the problem, is containing the waste coming from these cows in an adequate way. And what they do, and I'm learning a lot by watching this, most of the like buildings that they keep these cattles in, underneath them are big poop storage facilities, if you will, kind of like sewages. But what they do, and I'm learning, I kind of knew a lot of this from culinary school and stuff, but they keep that, and what they generally do is they pump a lot of that sewage into these truck distributors that they have, take them to their actual land that grows grass or alfalfa or what have you, and they spread that manure as fertilizer. It's great for it's returning to the environment what was there. But what's happening here is that manure is seeping into the really, really deep parts of the ground, and that water is leaking into the ocean.
It pops back out into creeks and different.
So really the only issue is the proximity to the ocean. That's really what it is. If those farms were further away from the ocean, then that contaminated water would not reach to the oceans, if you will.
Correct. And it's a little bit more than that. Point Reyes is a huge area for marine mammals. You know, you got the seals and everything that live right there. You have the elk. You have a ton of coyotes. You have just a ton of wildlife who use that water as a resource. And I think that's like the bit. Not only that, there's people swimming on all these beaches, you know. And I think one of the most difficult things that the national park has to deal with immediately is there's no warning signs. Like there's no signs that's like, oh, there's E. coli here. Right. You remember when the American River still has a huge E. coli issue, but there's signs at the beach that say, hey, you know, this is poopy water. You know,
right? That I totally acknowledge they need signage there, but. So the proximity of those to the ocean. So if let's say those farms were 200 miles eastern, more inland, what it does is the land is, no matter where a dairy farm is, there is going to be this kind of contaminant, but the land is filtering out the water. You know, when it seeps into the land, that land is literally it's pulling out all of those nutrients, because those E. coli nutrients that are in that poop water is really good for the environment. It's adding carbon back into the soil, so it's good. And over time, that water is eventually going to end up in the ocean anyways, but it has so much time manipulating through dirt and other things that filter that water out that it's exactly. Yeah. So it's all about the proximity to the ocean. And so this is a problem that I have super like opposite opinions on. Like I really care for the dairy farms, and I appreciate that they've been doing this for hundreds of years. I think one of them said that they've been open since like the 1860s or something like that. Yeah. And I appreciate that, especially because this guy whose YouTube I'm following is a 10th generation farm. So they have adapted over the years, so you can see that family environment and the love that they have. But, you know, we also have to worry about the marine mammals. We also have to worry about the local people aren't going to go vacation and swim in that area if they know that it is known as being a pretty poopy water, you know, that's right. And so I have totally opposite differentiating opinions about it. I think something should be done, but I don't know. Yeah.
It's kind of, it's akin to the wolves, right? It's people's livelihood. It's the economy versus environmental issues and conservation. And some people are on the far ends of both sides. I tend to find us somewhere in the middle for all these, because God knows we need dairy farmers. I know that, and people work hard and make a living off of it. At the meantime, I want that wildlife to, especially in a national park like that one that's so beautiful, like Point Reyes. It's just this weird problem to have, and I don't know if there's another national park like this. I assume since Kennedy signed it, that there's other situations like this around the country where there's sort of local businesses, you know, intertwined with national parks. Certainly there's none other like that in Northern California. But it's just this weird problem that exists in Point Reyes. And first, it was a tule elk problem. It still is a problem where they're killing these animals who used to have massive herds in the state, and now they're, you know, barely existent, and now there's a big poop problem. So I don't want to beat a dead horse too much on this, but I did want to mention the wolf thing, in that I think a while ago when I first saw the wolf population herding the dairy cows, and the farmers of the owners of those dairy cows getting paid by the government. I don't know if I agree with that as much anymore. I feel like as a dairy farmer, it's your responsibility to protect those cows. And so like, I feel like you need to at least show that you made a substantial effort to keep those wolves out of your property. If they just snuck on the property, that's what they naturally do. Yeah. I think it's really hard to keep. But like when I'm watching this guy's YouTube, they
all of the cows are numbered, and so they don't have names for them, but they all have different personalities. And these farmers that have these smaller farms that produce the best quality, whether it be meat or dairy, they know their cows and they protect their cows. And so, I don't know. And I'm sure these farms are not like, oh, poor me. But I mean, I do feel like it's the farmers. It's at least a piece the farmer's responsibility.
So here's a devil's advocate for you. So let's say a farmer for centuries, he's a 10th generational farmer, and what have they done with predators? They've shot them, right? They've shot them for years, but now the government's saying you can't do that. Instead, you have to spend thousands of dollars on like an electric fence, a huge electric fence to keep these out. And they're like, screw you. Like, why do we have to pay for all that? That makes sense to me. That that's government overreach where they're saying, oh, you have to go spend your money, even though you pay taxes and we're telling you can't now do something. You know what I mean?
Well, but then also, you're also contaminating the waterways. I mean,
true.
You're doing, we're giving you this, and dairy farms pollute. It's not a very eco-friendly way of producing food, okay? But nonetheless, I mean, it's a give and take, and I see both sides, but...
So it's, and I'm just spitballing here, is a way to fix this problem for the government to, purchase land for these dairy farmers to move to? I mean, I assume that's a really good place to raise cattle because they started doing it in the 1800s, And by the way, those plush fields are probably perfect to feed them.
Right, being so close to like having the marine layer
totally.
Helps the grass grow, which helps feed the animals. Right.
So I don't know enough about the specific laws around it and around this lease that they have with this weird lease that they have with the National Park Service, but there has to be some middle ground we can find. Maybe the federal government pays to make sure this poop stays out of the water. I don't know, and I don't know how you do that, to be honest. But something's got to give because I follow a lot of these conservationists online, and they are pissed off about all this stuff.
Well, you can see it's clearly not an easy problem to solve because both